Yeah, we're live.
Okay.
All right, that's nice.
That's not.
So, this is working with joint business. We're trying to figure out how we end up on our base and how we make it work. And so, this ties into what we have. At least what we hope we've captured here, one of which is, the additional pressures from the bills that we were talking about. The A&E fiscal analyst, we talked about the, A&R, the treasurer, and then a double fix for the continuum of care. Apparently,
We took it out twice on in the Senate version of budget. We only meant to take it once.
You really wanted it out of there.
Yeah.
so that was sort of the additional pressures, and then trying to go back through and reconstruct what we did, in C-120. And we've, the sub-adoption, we're all in agreement, I think, with the 270. And then Spectrum, you were,
Yes,
um,
that was important.
I can see why they invited you off, Chair. We didn't get an invitation, I don't know why. Maybe we'll get one if we agree to put the money in.
No, I'm into Spectrum is they actually had invited us before we'd even done that, so
Okay.
it was all good.
If we did a recovery housing 3%, just inflationary, that's 30,000. And then that's separate apart from, the other, requests.
Yes.
Youth Service Bureau, that was to give each of the 5, the 25. And then, there was concern from the agency that we were singling out one youth service bureau for homeless, programming. And so we had wanted to make sure that, in fact, if there were other, youth service bureaus that wanted to do more for homelessness, homeless youth, that money would continue. And then we've had the, some discussion about community justice centers, which would be 300,000. And so you add that up, and how would you get to that?
Here.
And so one of the things that we've talked about is what we do with the governor had taken an adjustment of 9 million on the childcare base. You had restored it, we had partially. We could one we could do is take that base money, but what but concurrent with that is on our contingent list, move the 8 million, and which would be in the money based on everything we know today. And the advantage of that is that that can serve as a stabilization reserve to the special fund that we set up for childcare.
So we would move that 8 million to there.
Yes,
And then we leave 1 million still.
yes. And because we do not have a stabilization reserve at that point, it seems like if we're talking about a program that's going to be generating tax revenue, and that's why we also, I guess part of that would be that language solution that we've had, because when you're asking employers to pay a payroll tax and make sure that the employees have childcare available, it changes the whole dynamic of what it used to be. And so we would still want to remove that language, just like we wouldn't say UI is out of money, standard line. So if you want to take a look at that in terms of how we could get to addressing the base issues that you've identified as important.
Right.
And this separate and apart from the recovery residents.
Right, I got that.
Right.
So I just have a question on the childcare to contingent and the concept. I think is a great concept of a stabilization reserve. I just would want to make sure that it's not only for that in case it's necessary for next year to meet our obligations, depending upon how those tax revenues.
Yeah, it isn't as though we're creating a requirement for stabilization.
Okay,
reserves. It would just simply,
Sit in the
it
just
would
sit
sit
there.
in the fund,
Okay, gotcha.
have that.
Okay,
We-
thank you.
When we go through the contingent language, the way we drafted it is that we'll move the 8 million over to the to the childcare.
It's a special
The
fund that
special
we
fund.
created
Childcare.
last year.
Something special fund.
Yes,
And then in the Budget Adjustment Act, you may recall that we included language that requires the treasurer in consultation with Joint Fiscal Office of Finance and Management to look at reserves generally across state government, and that the part of that report shall include a recommendation on whether or not this money that was transferred as part of this shall be formally designated as a reserve, or how that should work. So it sort of sets it up for that recommendation as part of that report, rather than get in front of that,
right.
sort of park it there and then.
And then we've also got where joint fiscal would do like we do
The analysis,
Medicaid
right,
caseload.
right,
Yeah, have
right.
that.
They do a forecast.
Yeah.
Like the PM.
Nolan almost volunteered to do it for another major area of state government.
We almost did,
So
yes.
with that, I was wondering, then I'm comfortable that the on line 130, then your language then. Renting?
If that's the, chapter
Yes,
language,
yes. Yes. So
And
I just want to.
Well, that reserve
Line
is right
130?
Yeah, at the bottom. Today's sheet.
Alright.
Okay. I'm calling this what, C 120 plus.
This is what.
This is base, this is the changes that we would be making. to
It's
the
a
base.
base session,
The whole base. But I should take a look at the big sheet on page 2 to make sure.
So this will go to what section?
17.2, I was told.
317.
317, so yeah, we'll put it in B 317, and then we'll have language that just makes it clear this is what the space money is for, with the exception of the recovery housing, which will go to health.
Thank you. Thank you.
So the other is going to 317.
I'm sorry, am I in
Yeah.
face? No?
No.
Okay, so that,
So 4 things.
So, the moving along. I think that takes care of the base.
I'm just looking at it now, there's I don't.
We still have the
No,
issue
okay.
around the NOFA and, one time, issue.
Right.
And then we've done the rejiggered contingency list that people can look at. And this is the contingency based on the year-end surplus,
And then we've got, okay, that.
but I won't do that yet until,
I'm sorry.
what?
I have it.
So how do we do that then? And we did get an update from Gary DeCarolis. For those of us on the Senate side who didn't have the benefit, I think, of the same level of information about 18 to 24 more beds coming online. Is that the same number you have?
Well, actually, I was told 12 to 16.
All right.
6 to 8 and 2. It depends on whether, how much of this that we find for 2 residences, it's 12 to 16. But here, I will, hand this out. That's just a summary of what it is. Oh, sorry, I was getting to my team.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I'll pass it. Oh, that's right. Okay. And then this would be the.
Here.
Guide.
Thank you.
This would be the language piece that goes with that.
and that's what Gary said. VHCD does the acquisition of the property itself.
Right. And so this references the 1.2 from the opioid settlement fund. And the language that we talked
Oh, we
about
already added my B.
is good. You asked for it, and I'm like, oh, on top of it.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Right.
So, and you'll see something similar for syringe services in a moment. So this, looks at providing not only base funding for the existing 83 beds, but, also to expand capacity, which we all know is necessary. And I do want to highlight that we have lost recovery residences because we've not been able to provide any kind of stable funding and this is really important. This is the piece, and it's particularly important in a number of cases, but including those folks who are exiting corrections that utilize these home.
Transition.
Yeah,
All right, so we're using opioid abatement special fund that we still have available.
yes.
So when, just from a like technical perspective, we're gonna tweak, so we should say 0.2 million from the opioid settlement fund.
Yes.
Okay, we'll add that in, make that clear. And it's not allocated, it's gonna be appropriated, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
appropriated, yeah. Yeah.
So shall, or, so we will update just the first part to make sure that says.
All right,
In
that's
fiscal
correct.
year 2025, only 2 million is appropriated to the Vermont Department of Health from the opioid settlement fund. Be used in consultation with Vermont Alliances, something like that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it should
So-
probably say including at least 2 new, just saying that, at least 2 new.
At least. And G is the future.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I said if we're doing this, then it's anticipating that we're not creating residents and destabilizing.
It'd be stabilizing them next year.
Right.
So I said if it worked for then Syringe, it's gonna work for this.
Right. That makes sense.
And the OPC and.
Right.
And speaking of syringe,
All right.
so this does 2 things. This language, put that same paragraph in there around, syringe services in terms of being able to, express legislative intent that they have ongoing funding, but it also then addresses the responsibilities. This morning, we talked about, we need to ensure that the opioid abatement settlement fund advisory committee, that we're also relegating with them to make the recommendations around continuation of services that are not one-time in nature, that are ongoing. So that last sentence you see there is addressing that.
Oh, and I see you did rename, at no less than no more.
Yes. Well, no less, no more. Below.
We didn't think that was you.
No, that's not intended, of course, right?
At no less than. Okay.
And why do you want that last?
Well, it's very similar to when organizations get a grant. And then they basically come back and say, oh, now the grants are doing wonderful things, now fund it. And we're like saying, if you're setting something up like recovery residency or the syringe service or the OPC, then inherent in making that recommendation is there is a long-term commitment to continue the funding.
This is not a pilot and we don't expect it to go away.
That's right.
Exactly.
And so anybody
We're
who's,
gonna fix the problem.
We're not gonna fix the problem like in the immediate future.
but that's to me, one of the things you always have to keep in mind if you're on joint fiscal. And my colleagues, and that is we get all these grants. And then people say, well, we're doing wonderful things, isn't this wonderful? The grants ended, so now start funding us. And inherent in that is the grant makers are now determining the priorities for funding. As opposed to what we're thinking are the priorities that we should be funding. So it's
Yeah.
but we,
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
so I
Which
think,
is why it's another really good reason with the government accountability, I'm like, is anyone better off? There's something to me as pilot or pilot.
they might be better off, but it may not be our top priority. And so the funders are funding because that's
Right.
their priority. And sometimes by accepting it, we don't think, well, if that grant goes away, will that
Right.
be a priority?
Funding other people's priorities and not thinking about ours.
Yeah. That's
Because
exactly
we
what
can,
I'm.
because we can reach out to whether the grant is from federal or not, that we don't want to let go of it, or that we,
Yeah,
that
and
we go by.
not to say the grant isn't doing wonderful things, but it's just how does that stack up and compete with, existing obligations, like recovery residents. So, shall we go
Are
to,
we good with this, these two?
I think so, so now that we've got, at no less. So we have, I think we're on to, one times,
Contingent,
I mean,
one time,
We're just
contingent,
calling it the contingent.
yeah.
all right.
Is there a-
All right, the contingency.
Do we have a new list for that?
Coming.
Oh, you've got it.
I've got it.
Gotta be different.
Thank you, Bess. You have it. Oh,
Unless it changes.
Oh,
Yeah,
we gotta figure out,
I just want to clean
Yeah.
the sheet one time.
Oh, yeah.
And we can take a look at it. Obviously, the 20 million for temporary housing is absolutely, oh, yeah. The 3.5, and that was something really important, I think, to both sides, and that
Well,
was
that
to
was, yeah.
elevate the
Mhm.
homes. Flooding, I think probably the, hearing on national news, the Wrightsville Dam is like gonna flood Montpelier even more. So our dams were like, the risk,
Yeah.
it's huge. This is
This is
replacing
the-
this, using this as a way of funding the child welfare
Right.
information.
That's what it's
Because we had-
so-
Yeah.
Right.
Part of it, yeah.
This is the FEMA match that we moved down in the pension,
And so when you put those two lines 5 and 6 together is where.
where we get
The
it.
25.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Most.
Healthy homes, that is, people with limited income with their wastewater and, drinking water. This was the A&R, we were just replacing, because you had taken it and, but we're adding it back here.
I'm only smiling because there's a member in my committee room right now, who once on hearing this would be very happy.
I see. This is really important, and I
This
think
is.
probably we'll have language in your proposal relative to the additional 10 million we're putting in for the, shelter beds.
So when people look at this list, we've got an additional 30 million for total.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But it's more than that, if we put in the resident housing and we're doing the homeless youth,
Yes,
just
more
we
than
all have
housing.
to only look at one piece, and I think, it's really reflective of a multi,
The big picture.
exactly, the recovery housing, the youth shelter,
Yeah.
yes, all that to that.
food bank. The pipeline of our nursing homes to see if they can start getting off their reliance on agency staffing.
Mhm.
So I don't need to go through, the question is, are they, we did kind of say number 20, the caseload reserve to pay that back should be the bottom of the list. And the IT system and the rest, we've talked about, it appears, based on what we're being told, that, and again, the hard thing is, what we're getting are revenues based on tax year 23.
Right.
So we're still getting some of that bulge, I guess, through our system.
Right.
And appears that we are gonna end up with a surplus at an amount that this would cover. And then Emily had referenced some other language because we're all concerned about what the BAA might entail. And so
Correct,
there's some language that we could simply
If there's more in excess
Yeah.
of this.
and you had some language you were gonna suggest, and maybe Brady can write it
Yes,
up
when we,
for us to consider.
we'll quickly go back and do just a couple more, we need to, probably after this, we'll need to do some tweaks to some language real quick to bring back to the committee.
And then, well, we got the NOFA, the question is.
No,
Would we add 50
yeah.
here?
We, yeah, so the 50 is, that we thought we had from a specific source doesn't exist,
Right,
so.
we figured that out.
So we could make that number 19 and move 19 and 20 down, do it before the.
Before the IT,
Yeah.
Yeah,
and how much for the NOFA? The difference, I think, we all by.
I think it's more than,
well, they wanted more than
They
that,
want,
well, we could get some.
they want a minimum of 300.
Well, they have 240.
On the
Could we get them
one
to
hand?
300? Let's do
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
Let's go to the 300.
So
60.
you're doing it at number 18? The new number.
Yeah, between
No,
18
it
and
would be,
19.
it would be
The
19,
new
and
number,
then,
19.
judiciary becomes 20, and,
Transfer.
chancellry is 21, so, and then also
Comes of age.
50 is number
Right
19.
right here.
Yeah.
So. We add 50,000 here.
That is like
60.
So just to say that out again, we're gonna add
60.
60
60, and it'll be number 19, and then.
right here.
And judiciary will be.
Thank you, Kathy. Did I say 60? It's been a long time.
60,000.
Okay, number 19.
Number 19, and then
To
just push together
AAFN.
for NOFA, yeah.
And then we did close out all of this. That,
I'm
I believe there is still a question
Oh, no,
on the
wait.
conservation districts and the FILPA.
we just did that.
We just did that.
So it's done in terms of, we'll do the 100 one time for the conservation districts, and then I can't remember the number that's in the Senate version of the
It'll go.
budget for NOPA, plus the 60 on the contingent.
It was
Right.
240.
240,
60, that
That
makes
gets you
it
to
300.
Perfect, okay.
All right, so that's what we were holding. And then we clarified that we do have the funding for both those studies. That are in those two separate bills.
Right.
One was on, public meeting and the other was on, regional or county governance.
And we saw the stuff for S
And we're now
59 on the earlier list, right? That's on the base list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, and we took care of ERAF. And for the, that was help your county, your.
Yes.
Well,
I think we
Q&A,
closed it.
One-time transfers, that's, 31.
Are we in the one times now?
Yes.
Okay,
on this
sorry.
sheet.
Section three,
It's,
okay.
to do the match for the counties, the ERAF match. For August and September, we'll have them with a match.
Yeah.
And then they got the.
Okay.
Economic relief as well.
Yeah.
Where, and that was,
There's 200,000 to the agency administration on that sheet, I believe.
there's on.
Okay, so we're
Yeah,
closing
the
7, 8, and
21.
9.
7, 8, and 9,
We're closing.
and then
That was
we
the
did
last
close
thing I had.
19, because we've done those, and 19 and 20, we did S
Right, but you
159.
close those,
And well, line 31 on the one times is what I'm closing out.
yes.
Yeah, we did that when it tied to number 21.
Right, so that's all the one times.
No.
I don't have anything left on here.
No, I don't
Was
either.
there's not, this was just an updated page of
I
that.
think we've closed it all out.
I think we
Yeah.
have.
And then we agree with this, and then this is base.
So now we have a couple of other things that I'm just
Somebody in
needing
the
to
room will
confirm.
remind us that we listen.
And that is whether we have to revisit the PCB issue.
Right.
Is that still outstanding?
and-
That's-
We need to have a communication.
We just need some confirmation, don't we? I think that,
Yeah, we're-
I'll see if I can get any more.
And then you were still, you have some language that you're going to present relative to
GA.
the GA.
Would you
And I-
like to see that?
We take a quick break to make sure we got
Yeah.
I think it would be
everything. We've got
advisable,
all of
yeah.
the.
So,
everything.
I'll go run down the PCB.
And go,
if you
yeah,
could,
yeah.
PCB, and then make sure that
Phone.
whatever purple language that is being drafted is
Okay.
reflective.
do you wanna see it?
And state saying, saying from this morning. Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll get
We're,
some.
good, yeah, we're with the Senate,
Okay,
okay.
starting with the
Not that.
baseline.
Um.
Okay.
So we'll
So,
break till.
so we'll, I don't know, 5:15?
Okay, let's go find out about